Arjun. I'm a second year student here at Berkeley, majoring in economics and operations research. And on behalf of Speaker Series India at Berkeley, it's my honor to welcome you all to our first in-person event of the semester. And our speaker for today is Mr. Sharad Vivek Sagar. And so let me just brief you with the format for today's event. So first I'll introduce Sharad to all of you, then we'll listen to Sharad, and at last we'll be taking up the audience Q&A. So for those of you who don't know about Speaker Series, we are a club who aims to bring conversations from different cultural fabrics of India. And in the past we have hosted various famous speakers, politicians, entertainers, just to name a few. And it's our privilege that Sharad is here for our first in-person event of the semester. So we can get started right away. Also, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors for the event, HPSA and the Behavioral Economics Association at Berkeley. So we can get started right away. As many of you might already know, Sharad is a globally renowned social entrepreneur, a thought leader, and a widely followed youth icon. He was raised in small towns and villages of Bihar. After that, Sharad founded the national organization Dexterity Global at the age of 16. Today, Dexterity is one of the largest youth-focused organizations in India, providing education and leadership opportunities to young people in over 15 countries. Sharad is also the first Indian to be elected president of the student government at Harvard, an achievement that speaks volumes about his passion for education and leadership. Under his leadership, students from Dexterity have received over rupees 114 crores in scholarships from top universities across the world. Impressed by his achievements, President Barack Obama invited Sharad to the White House in 2016. He was also listed on the prestigious Forbes 30 under 30 list, and the Queen of England included him in the Queen's Young Leaders list. Sharad also appears on the expert panel of India's most watched television show, Kaun Banega Crorepati, which I'm sure most of you might have watched at some point in your high school or middle school. And apart from that, Sharad is regarded as a firebrand orator and a thought leader, and he has been invited to speak at over 250 stages across 20 plus states in an average year. Michigan State University put Sharad on its social entrepreneurship syllabus. The government of Taiwan quoted him on their social impact agenda, and last year only, Sharad was awarded the Editor's Choice Award for India's Youth Icon for representing the bold face of young India and redefining education and leadership for millions of young Indians. As I said, Sharad's achievements are endless, and I'm sure you all are eager to listen to him. And it's needless to say that he's a true inspiration, and his journey is a testament of the fact that with hard work and dedication, we can achieve anything we want and create a positive impact on the world. So without any further delay, please join me in welcoming Sharad Vivek Sagar to the stage.
Thank you, Arjun. Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible to everyone. First things first, I've come 8,000 miles to say to you on behalf of your parents and family members, Happy Holi. And the fact that I'm here, it is humbling to be on this campus that has produced so many fine young leaders for the US and the rest of the world. So it is quite an honor to be here, and I'm excited to have this conversation. As was introduced, my name is Sharad Vivek Sagar. I was born and raised in small towns and villages of Bihar. Did not go to school for the first 12 years of my life. Went to a fine undergraduate institution, not on this coast of the country, but the other one. Went to Tufts for my undergrad, Harvard for my grad. And the reason why we are kind of having this conversation here today is because at the age of 16, I decided to start something called Dexterity Global. Some of the conversation points that you heard in the introduction are all related to dexterity. I know many of you here are interested in areas like startups and entrepreneurship. Some of you zero down to social entrepreneurship in general. And definitely all of you want to contribute to your country in an important way. Those of you who are not Indian nationals, wherever you are, lifting your community up and contributing to where you come from is an aspiration that many young people do have and share. At Dexterity, it is all about that story. In the last 15 years, so yes, I've been leading the organization for 15 years now. I'm not that old. I was 15, 16 when I started. It's another matter that last month in India I was speaking at an IIT, and when I was invited to come in and deliver the keynote at that event, I had to sheepishly tell them, after accepting the invitation, that I was the keynote speaker here 13 years ago as well. So those things have begun happening. But I was on Stanford campus a couple of weeks back, and I had to tell them that 10 years ago also I came here. So it's a different story. Why did I get started with Dexterity? I think that in itself can be a conversation about empowering youth. For the first 12 years of my life, I grew up in small towns and villages, as I mentioned. Me, my elder brother, my elder sister. And my parents were very concerned how they would educate us in these parts of the country where there were no good schools, no good libraries, and they decided to teach us at home. And in this process, our education was largely threefold. Now when we look back at it and reflect, we figure out. The first part of the education was pretty simple. The rented houses that we lived in different parts of the country, quotations of great men and women of our times and those who came before us were pasted in English and in Hindi. And every morning when we woke up, we walked around the house reading these quotations aloud. One of the prime quotations that would always catch my attention, majority of these quotations were from him. They came from Swami Vivekananda, who's been seen as a great influence on even that generation of freedom fighters in the country. Continues to be a huge influence for young people in India and even those in major leadership positions. So that was the first part of my education, reading quotations of these great men and women. The second part of my education was also pretty simple. Parents were concerned how we would find out about the world, to grow more aware. So they made it mandatory for us to read newspapers every day. Now just to give you some context, newspapers in this part of the world used to come one day late. So if India won a test match today, you would find out tomorrow. I would find that out day after tomorrow what happened in that game. So reading newspapers was the second part, and the third part was the textbooks and notebooks would be bought and brought home, and we would self-teach ourselves. Our parents would help us a little bit. In this process, the second part of the journey, that is reading newspapers, had a huge influence on my life. Each year I would read about three kinds of students. Somebody who received a full scholarship to go to a top university on a full scholarship, somebody who just won a national or an international competition, and someone who would represent India at an international forum abroad. And I wanted to, be that kid, somebody who would go to a top school on a full scholarship or win an international competition or represent India at a global forum. But I could not have done any of the three things because I was not enrolled in a school. So I picked up a very simple habit, and that was that every time a newspaper story came out about a student who had just done something phenomenal, I would just write down the name of the competition or the scholarship or the university, who can participate in this or who can apply for this scholarship, and in which month the news came out. So this is basically something that I kept doing till I was 12 years of age. My elder brother and sister had now to write their school leaving exams, like the board exams. So we decided to move to the capital city of Bihar with my mother and got enrolled in a school. I was the youngest kid of the family, going to school for the longest period of time, so my parents were concerned. They said, your chances of getting spoiled in the school system is the highest, so beware. But long story short, I went to school and I became an outstanding student. Because I came from a family where, parents believe that if your elder brother can do this, if your elder sister can do this, you can do it as well. So majority of the stuff my siblings had been taught, I had also been taught at a tender age. So when I went to school, I had a lot of time, so I would tell jokes to my friends, and I would always be found standing out of the class. So that is the kind of outstanding I was. But all these opportunities that I have noted down all these years, I started participating in all of those, and fast forward that story, by the time I was finishing grade 12, I'd won close to 200 different local, national, and international competitions and represented India in over 6 different countries. At all these global platforms, of course, on one end, there was a lot of conversation, within friends, especially parents of my friends, teachers, that, oh, you should learn from Sharad, he's doing this, he's doing that. But when I would come back from all these global platforms, there were 2 things that I would always notice, and they would haunt me. One was, I would come back from a Tokyo or a Seoul, which I only learned it was called Seoul when I visited, else it was Seoul for me. But I would come back from a Tokyo or a Seoul, and I would tell my friends that what kind of hotels we stayed in, how the flight took off, how clean the streets in Tokyo were, and everything that a kid who's in grade 8 or 9, who's doing international travel for the first time, would come back and tell his friends. Except I would also tell them the questions that were asked or the ideas that were put forward or discussed. Many times, only to find that a kid sitting right next to me, who came from another small village or district of Bihar, many times they knew an answer to a question that everybody missed out on at a national or international platform. Many times they had ideas much brighter than any other idea put forward at a global forum. And I would find myself saying it to them that, oh, you should have been there, you should have participated. And I was quick enough to realize that my friends were equally smart and hardworking. The reason why they were not at these global platforms was because they did not know that these opportunities exist. They didn't know that NASA had a kids club or organized a space settlement contest, that Google did a science fair, that Intel had a science challenge, some of which you might also not know despite sitting here at UCB. But in general, that was the first part that I kind of realized in my conversations with my friends. The second part was equally stark. At all these global platforms, especially United Nations forums, we were filled with a lot of pride and this confidence that you are going to lead the future. You're going to solve the problems of the world, you're going to lift people up, and you're going to be the future leaders that this world needs. But many times the conversation was about access to clean drinking water, climate change, access to electricity, literacy, poverty. And if a girl child from a small village of Rajasthan who's seen her mother go 1.5 kilometers to fetch a bucket of water, if she was present at this platform, her lived experiences, her creative solution, her deliberation or engagement at this platform would be so much more powerful and inspirational. And if we really want to go back from here and begin to build our communities bottom up, offer that leadership at the grassroots, and really build camaraderie among leaders throughout the nation, building a nationwide network of those kind of leaders, we would be better serving ourselves if we identified and tapped into these talents and groomed them forward. But of course, that wasn't the case at that point in time. So 2008, I was in high school, and Dexterity was founded with twin goals. The first one was, if there's any opportunity in the world, anywhere that is designed especially for our children and youth, they should be the first ones to know about it. At this point, on the first Sunday of every month, we connect close to 7 million kids around our country within their institutions or families with educational opportunities from all around the world. But not just that, we also care about the fact that there might be some kid in some village of our country who's found out about an essay writing competition that the government of India is doing or New York Times is doing, and might have never written an essay in a vernacular language or in English ever. So how do you coach, groom, or prepare those kids for this level? And for that reason, with every opportunity that Dexterity puts out, kids have 2 preparation material to get equipped with. So an essay writing competition would have a material that helps them with how to draft an essay, and the other one on how to construct an argument. But this is basically from a very young age, kids get to know about local, national, and international opportunities, prepare themselves to compete at a global level, and match the global standard and academic rigor that might be required for them to move forward. The second goal that Dexterity has is to build that next generation of servant leaders that we need, to build that next generation of local role models that India needs at this point in time. What do I mean when I say next generation of servant leaders or next generation of local role models? It's pretty simple. When we look at our country's history in general, in 1888, India sent one of its finest young sons to a place called University College London, which was one of the best universities in the world then and remains one today. In 1913, we sent another young, bright student from India to Columbia University. And you look at it, the UCL graduate comes back to India and powers its journey to freedom, while the Columbia graduate comes back and paves the path to our self-determination. On one end, you have Mahatma Gandhi, who comes back from UCL and commits to that larger journey of walking India to freedom. While on the other end, you have B.R. Ambedkar, who comes back after his education and commits to ensuring that the Republic is strong and inclusive and makes a path possible for every person to move forward. That generation of freedom fighters, majority of them, went to some of the best institutions in India and the world. And the question we must ask is that a generation of bright, young, talented, hardworking people went to Columbia. A generation of bright, hardworking, young, talented people went to UCL. What makes a Gandhi or what makes an Ambedkar an Ambedkar? And the answer is pretty simple. The great journey that India has had so far is one where the young people of India have been able to align their personal and educational goals with their national goal. And if we are able to do that, we have seen that that generation was able to walk us to freedom. The next generation in 1947, post-independence, a young kid graduates from University of Cambridge, returns to India, meets with the first Prime Minister and says that space should not be the fortress of Soviet Russia and the United States alone, that India too can become a space power. And because of the education of a young Vikram Sarabhai, today, India launches space projects for a quarter of the budget that Hollywood takes to launch a space movie about the same field. In 1948, a young kid graduates from Michigan State University, comes back to India with an education in dairy technology, goes to the sleepy town of Anand in Gujarat, a place at a point in time when in India we did not have enough milk to feed our growing population. And for 50 years, Verghese Kurian works with Tribhuvan Das Patel from Anand in Gujarat with 9 Indian Prime Ministers back to back. And in 1998, India becomes the largest producer of milk in the world, overtaking the same United States of America that Dr. Kurian had left and returned from. When I talk about servant leadership and a new generation of servant leaders, it is about these young people who were able to build their skills and expertise and use their education to power the journey of their country forward, and many times the world. At this point in time, when Dexterity talks about the next generation of servant leaders, we are talking about that generation. We'll put more kids through school and make sure that school in India is as inclusive and affordable as entertaining and enriching. As we talk about that next generation of servant leaders, we are looking for that generation that will make sure that healthcare is more accessible and affordable. That ranging from insurance to patient care, wherever you come in and make an intervention, you make Indian healthcare world class and make sure that anybody, anywhere in the country, has access to the same kind of healthcare that you would want for your parents and family members. When we talk about that next generation of servant leaders, we mean that agriculture and science can go hand in hand, and the same equations that you write that put a man on the moon can also get an ambulance out of a traffic jam. The basic thing that Dexterity is talking about is really ensuring that young people are able to bridge that gap between their education and their leadership. And we have a very simple idea of leadership that we talk about at Dexterity. It is your ability to deliver value through whatever limited expertise you have. And that means that a 5-year-old kid who doesn't know how to read or write or talk all that well but can walk and helps her 2-year-old younger sister to walk, that child is a leader. A 15-year-old kid who cannot write lines of code or cannot work at a think tank but knows how to write English or Hindi or Gujarati or Kannada or Telugu or Odia, whatever language the kid speaks or can write, and writes a letter for an old woman to get a widow pension card, that child is a leader. At the age of 25, the same kid at 5 who could walk and help somebody walk, who could write and wrote for somebody, at the age of 25, the same person can be at a policy think tank or in a research facility or be starting something of their own. And that is essentially leadership. And when you put that definition back in as an equation, the ability to deliver value through whatever limited expertise you have, it is that limited expertise that we hope to increase through education. Many of us go through school and college, unfortunately so, without ever being asked or told, why does a country send an entire generation to school? And why do we send an entire generation to college? And the answer to that can be simple enough in the stories of those who have lifted us up. Through science or social science, through movement or organizing, through reading or writing, whatever path they took, but they lifted more people up and handed to us a better planet to live in. And for that reason, this is the larger idea with which Dexterity was founded. I'll go back and dive into a few details, but in the last 15 years, who we have been able to prepare, we call them local role models. At Dexterity, we were convinced in 2008 that we cannot produce 10,000 Ivy League graduates in the next 10 years. That was not going to be possible. We knew that we could not have built 10,000 founders in the next decade or so. But we knew we could have shaped the next generation local role models who will lift up the levels of access and aspiration and achievement into the United Nations Children and Youth Board have come from the Dexterity system. They have received more than 1.15 billion in scholarships, and these kids come from some of the most ordinary and many times underserved and disadvantaged backgrounds that you can imagine. If you were in India last summer, you might have read the story of the kid of a daily wage earner who received a full scholarship to go for his bachelor's degree to Pennsylvania. Or if you were in the country in 2021, in December, a kid got an early round admit to UChicago, a kid from Tirupur in Tamil Nadu who had never taken a train out of her village, a 17-year-old kid who gets to pursue her dream of studying medicine. Now, these kids come from these parts of the country, but they come in with that greater idea that that third generation of servant leaders that India needs at this point, to lift more people up, to lead the path forward, they hope to bridge that gap through their education. They hope to be those leaders in journalism and in science and in tech, in engineering and in medicine, whatever field you can imagine. On the other end, these young people have a very clear idea. I know in 2008 when we started out in Dexterity, we said we are on a mission to power the next generation of leaders through educational opportunities and training. And way too many people would ask us that, you talk about education, that is good, you talk about scholarship, that is good, why do you talk about leadership? And the answer was very simple. For far too many of our kids growing up in India, the Hindi word of leader, which is neta, if you went to a public maidan and asked young kids, how many of you want to become netas, one or two hands go up and everybody else giggles. When you ask them the same question in English, a few more hands go up, but not as many. For far too long, we've made leadership synonymous to political leadership, conveniently forgetting that it is leaders in every single field who have continued to raise us up and lift us forward. On the other end, the idea of leadership has been separated from education very conveniently. That is why we bridge our independence movement back to education again. That is why we bridge white revolution and green revolution, our space program and our defense program back to education again. And that is the reason why we bridge our grassroots young leaders with the top of the country again. Because we believe that these young kids who are going to the Harvards and Cambridges of the world, the UChicagos and the Georgetowns of the world, some of the most prestigious institutions back in India itself, they are the ones who, with a nationwide network of young leaders, with camaraderie that they've grown up with, they will go on to lift our country forward. 15 years later, as I stand here today, to many people it is convincing that Dexterity is India's scholarship story. That you do not need to be born in the family of a cabinet minister or an industrialist to go to a top school, that you could be somebody whose mother works as a domestic help in somebody's house, and still you can go to a top school anywhere in the world on a full ride. In 25 years' time, Dexterity will be India's leadership story. It will be the story that will be evident and visible to people. But the reason why I share that with you is, Dexterity is not a shoe store, it's not a footwear shop, that you need to come to the store and buy a particular brand of shoe. It is an idea that says that every kid should have a shoe to put on. And that is the reason why you are here at an incredible institution with an exceptional education that many outside can only begin to dream of getting in their lifetimes. Your responsibility is as high as that of the generation of a Gandhi or an Ambedkar. Your responsibility is as high as that generation of a Sarabhai or a Kurian. And Goldman Sachs is great and JP Morgan is fantastic, but at the same time, the talents and skills and abilities that you have, even while you work for corporate America or corporate India, if you're able to lift a few more people up, if you're able to schedule a few more interviews or a few more mentoring sessions with those who come after you, if you're able to put your talents and abilities to use to build that next generation marvel that healthcare or education, agriculture or science needs, then our country or the world will be better off. 14 regional ambassadors of India to the United Nations Children and Youth Board have come from the Dexterity system. They received more than 1.15 billion in scholarships, and these kids come from some of the most ordinary and many times underserved and disadvantaged backgrounds that you can imagine. If you were in India last summer, you might have read the story of the kid of a daily wage earner who received a full scholarship to go for his bachelor's degree to Pennsylvania. Or if you were in the country in 2021, in December, a kid got an early round admit to UChicago, a kid from Tirupur in Tamil Nadu who had never taken a train out of her village. A 17-year-old kid who gets to pursue her dream of studying medicine. Now, these kids come from these parts of the country, but they come in with that greater idea that that third generation of servant leaders that India needs at this point, to lift more people up, to lead the path forward. They hope to bridge that gap through their education. They hope to be those leaders in journalism and in science and in tech, in engineering and in medicine, whatever field you can imagine. On the other end, these young people have a very clear idea. I know in 2008 when we started out in Dexterity, we said we are on a mission to power the next generation of leaders through educational opportunities and training. And way too many people would ask us that, you talk about education, that is good, you talk about scholarship, that is good, why do you talk about leadership? And the answer was very simple. For far too many of our kids growing up in India, the Hindi word of leader, which is neta, if you went to a public maidan and asked young kids, how many of you want to become netas, one or two hands go up and everybody else giggles. When you ask them the same question in English, a few more hands go up, but not as many. For far too long, we've made leadership synonymous to political leadership, conveniently forgetting that it is leaders in every single field who have continued to raise us up and lift us forward. On the other end, the idea of leadership has been separated from education very conveniently. That is why we bridge our independence movement back to education again. That is why we bridge white revolution and green revolution, our space program and our defense program back to education again. And that is the reason why we bridge our grassroots young leaders with the top of the country again. Because we believe that these young kids who are going to the Harvards and Cambridges of the world, the UChicagos and the Georgetowns of the world, some of the most prestigious institutions back in India itself, they are the ones who, with a nationwide network of young leaders, with camaraderie that they have grown up with, they will go on to lift our country forward. 15 years later, as I stand here today, to many people it is convincing that Dexterity is India's scholarship story. That you do not need to be born in the family of a cabinet minister or an industrialist to go to a top school, that you could be somebody whose mother works as a domestic help in somebody's house, and still you can go to a top school anywhere in the world on a full ride. In 25 years' time, Dexterity will be India's leadership story. It will be the story that will be evident and visible to people. But the reason why I share that with you is, Dexterity is not a shoe store, it's not a footwear shop, that you need to come to the store and buy a particular brand of shoe. It is an idea that says that every kid should have a shoe to put on. And that is the reason why you are here at an incredible institution with an exceptional education that many outside can only begin to dream of getting in their lifetimes. Your responsibility is as high as that of the generation of a Gandhi or an Ambedkar. Your responsibility is as high as that generation of a Sarabhai or a Kurian. And Goldman Sachs is great and JP Morgan is fantastic, but at the same time, the talents and skills and abilities that you have, even while you work for corporate America or corporate India, if you're able to lift a few more people up, if you're able to schedule a few more interviews or a few more mentoring sessions with those who come after you, if you're able to put your talents and abilities to use to build that next generation marvel that healthcare or education, agriculture or science needs, then our country or the world will be better off because of your education. If I've been too serious for too long, I think I want to tell you a simple story of that the first part you've definitely heard in your lifetime. I'll tell you the second part and open it up for Q&A. The story goes, and maybe before I dive into the story, and those of you who might be thinking, or if you have even an iota of doubt left anywhere in your mind about the dexterity generation or these young people, I want to tell you something from November of 2022. Many times when I talk to people around the world, and especially those who are slightly skeptic, or who have a rationale or a logic for everything, they many times feel that these young kids trained in the dexterity system go to places charitably. It is more on charity and not necessarily because they deserve it. In 2022 November, UNESCO headquarters awarded the winners of the 2022 Global Climate Championship. The prompt was very simple. Identify a major climate challenge and propose a business or a policy solution that you want to come up with. 5-member teams from all around the world, all the QS top 10 universities, top 100 universities in the world participated, except one team of teenagers from Dexterity also participated, reached out to us and said, we want to participate as Team Dexterity, can we? And we said, go ahead and participate. Turns out that team won the national and the regional semifinals and finals, stormed into the global finals, competed with top 5 teams around them, including IIT Bombay, Imperial College London, London School of Economics, HKUST, and HEC Paris. Top 6 teams, global finals of the Global Climate Championship, all top business schools and policy schools of the world. At the end of the day, the winners of the €7,500 each prize for the Global Climate Championship were the 5 teenagers who came from India and were a part of Team Dexterity. The reason why I tell you that story is because young people within the Dexterity system commit to something that we talk about as battle of high standards. The preparation that these young people get is not that, hey, you come from a rural background, so you need one level up. No, we fight the battle of high standards. If you write as well as anybody else in your grade year would. If you read as voraciously as you would want to read. If you research, do your research at a world-class level and see what can come out of it. That is the essential dexterity practice. And it is seen when these young people go to top schools around the world. Many of them go on to lead student governments, maintain high GPAs, go work for top institutions. And if any of you played Angry Birds as a game, the senior product manager of Angry Birds is a dexterity kid. If you watched Something in the Rain, the Korean blockbuster on Netflix, the girl who did the remake for it for India, which is about to get launched, is a dexterity kid. So these kids are everywhere in the world today, and pardon my language when I say kid. I was the team manager for Harvard hockey for far too long, I guess. In sports world, they call everybody a kid. But well, so that is essentially the dexterity story. I want to end with a funny story for you, and then we'll break into Q&A. Whatever questions you might have, you can throw those at me. I'm happy to take those. The story is the first part you've all heard, probably. The second part I want to give you, and then I'm going to stop. It is the story of the famed cap seller. A cap seller who used to sell caps every day. One lazy summer afternoon, he's selling caps, he gets tired, he takes a detour, goes, sits under a tree, falls asleep, wakes up, sees his bag of caps. All the caps are gone. The only cap on his head remained. He gets up, walks 5-10 steps forward, turns around, looks up top, and on the tree, every monkey has a cap on. So the cap seller scratches his head and he sees that all the monkeys begin to scratch their heads. Only your papa told you the story. And then he goes back up on the tree. The reason why I tell you this story is that the mistakes of the past generation might have been taken care of by accident, by luck, or by chance. If the next generation back home in India and all around the world actually wants to lift more people up, build stronger communities, fix problems that we have been given, or the ones that we'll create, it needs to happen through education and training. And for that reason, it is important that whether or not in high school or in college you were ever asked or told, why is an entire generation sent to school? And why do we send an entire generation to college? I hope that in your dorm rooms, in your office rooms, in your cubicles, in your startup corner offices, you'd always ask yourself that question. Why were you sent to school and why were you sent to college? And even if you end up with the wrong answer, remember that a few decades later, your children, and yes, your grandchildren, will ask you and tell you that when an entire generation did not have the opportunity to go to even school or these top colleges, you had that privilege. What did you do with it? So I think that is where I'll pause. Thank you so much for your patient listening. Quite an honor to be here.
Truly inspiring and enlightening words. I'm sure all of us have something to learn from this.
As a beneficiary of it, it depends on the mindset with which the person is going in, right? Now, if you have a teacher who is teaching at a government school somewhere in the country and it can be a girls' school, where he thinks that, oh, all these young women are going to get married after grade 10, and that is why they have been sent to school, you are not going to produce a Kalpana Chawla from that school. On the contrary, you might not have the best policy, curriculum, textbook, but if a teacher comes in with a commitment and an expectation of excellence from his or her students, and really commits to teaching, then you might have better results. But in general, the national education policy that is coming in might really strengthen and make the kind of adjustments and advancements we have needed in our education. About world-class institutions in India, I think this generation and the one right before this, those who have seen what world-class institutions are like, how the academia industry interface works, where he thinks that, oh, all these young women are going to get married after grade 10, and that is why they have been sent to school. You are not going to produce a Kalpana Chawla from that school. On the contrary, you might not have the best policy, curriculum, textbook, but if a teacher comes in with a commitment and an expectation of excellence from his or her students, and really commits to teaching, then you might have better results. But in general, the national education policy that is coming in might really strengthen and make the kind of adjustments and advancements we have needed in our education. About world-class institutions in India, I think this generation and the one right before this, those who have seen what world-class institutions are like, how the academia industry interface works, how research is used within the institutions and outside of it, they can be very good institution builders back in India. So that is a huge opportunity for many of you who can be key drivers of that process or system, or I would even go as far as to call it a movement in India that you can contribute to. But in general, it is we need next generation institution builders. The reason why I said we cannot produce 10,000 Ivy League graduates in 10 years was because, one, the spots are limited, two, those were first 10 years of Dexterity. We anticipate at this point in time that by 2029, our young people would have received more than 1,000 crores in scholarships, and each year we will be sending over 100 undergraduates and over 100 graduates to top universities across the world. That number is close to 40 right now, which is pretty solid compared to the delta, if you really look at it, where the kids are coming from and where they are headed. Thank you.
My name is Andy, and I come from China. So even though I can't directly relate to a lot of the things that you said about education and opportunity efficiency, I think it was still very inspiring to hear the words. So I was just wondering, since you started the Dexterity Global when you were 16, and I'm sure you changed a lot during that time, how did you change and how did the organization's goals and missions change with you?
That's a wonderful question. There were a few things that I'm grateful for that I had a little bit of clarity over when I was starting. One, I was not disappointed with the education system alone. I was also disappointed with how nonprofits worked. So Dexterity, interestingly, has a very unique business model where it does not accept government money or corporate donations. It does not accept outside money at all. It has a pay-if-you-can model where somebody can come in from an equally wealthy background and would pay for the program if accepted, and somebody would come in on financial aid. So that is something that stayed intact throughout. And when our frustration with nonprofits is to be listed, it is that nonprofits spend majority of their time knocking on doors, making phone calls, raising money, and many times raising money just based on a draft proposal that they have written. There is a disconnect between the beneficiary, the benefactor, and if at all there is a connect, it is in annual books or handshakes for a photo op. If Apple was a nonprofit and you went to the store and you told them that you got a broken iPhone, they would change it for you immediately because their entire supply chain, manufacturing, everything is interconnected, and there are serious repercussions even if one person's phone is broken. As a for-profit, if it was a non-profit, they might even be able to tell you that, oh, this is how it came for you, and turn you away, and there would be a disconnect between the person who paid for the phone, the person who's handing it over, the person who received it. That's the reason why in 2008, 2009, this realization was there in our mind, that we wanted to build the Apple or the Microsoft of the social impact world. Many times, the project is the organization. Many times, the activity that an NGO does is the NGO. And now you think of several NGOs or nonprofits that you know of. Feeding people in slums. That's the activity, that's the project, that's the organization. Anything else that mattered. We wanted to build an ecosystem, we knew that up front. We knew, so that's the reason why I want to add this to what all changed and what all did not. For that reason, what all did not has to be in mind. So our North Star was powering next generation of leaders. It will be by connecting them to opportunity and then doing everything else that it takes. We do not shy away from the fact that in the future we'll build a sports league at high school and college level, much like the NCAAs in the US. So there are multiple things that were there in our mind. We knew kind of the North Star, that okay, anything that contributes to building leadership. I grew up without getting any pocket money. Once a year, my family, my parents would give me and my two siblings a little bit of money to go to the book fair and buy some books. So when I was very young, I picked up this book called Over 300 Great Lives and read about these 300 different people. And that gave me this, inculcated this habit literally, that whatever you want to do, read about 100 or 30 or 50 or 20 examples from that particular field. And that's basically what I did when I was starting out. Look at all these organizations, and I was very, very surprised and shocked at that point in time that Google or Facebook or TED, they didn't start out saying, oh, we are a green battery company that is going to bring down your electricity by 15%, electricity cost by 15%. TED said, ideas worth spreading. Google said, making knowledge more accessible, whatever it was. I'm not going word by word there. So our thing was, okay, how do we operate in a space where the larger universe is powering next generation leaders? If at all there is any further clarity, it is on through educational opportunities and training. And that left a lot of room for us to build future organizational systems. What all has changed? I was a lot more intense, a lot more ambitious, almost aggressive when I was starting out. When I was in my undergrad, I used to operate on 3 to 4 hours of sleep, 2 cans of Red Bull, quit Red Bull completely, end of my senior year. We also had this frustration many times that other people are not able to see what we are trying to show. We wanted to show the problem to a lot of people, not realizing that maybe sometimes people learn better when they begin to see either the solution or the symbolic indicators of the solution. So those things have changed with time. A lot more patience has come in, and we have begun to master kind of the duality. Many times the project is the organization. Many times the activity that an NGO does is the NGO. And now you think of several NGOs or nonprofits that you know of. Feeding people in slums. That's the activity, that's the project, that's the organization. Anything else that mattered. We wanted to build an ecosystem, we knew that up front. We knew So that's the reason why I want to add this to what all changed and what all did not. For that reason, what all did not has to be in mind. So our North Star was powering next generation of leaders. It will be by connecting them to opportunity and then doing everything else that it takes. We do not shy away from the fact that in the future we build a sports league at high school and college level, much like the NCAAs in the US. So there are multiple things that were there in our mind. We knew kind of the North Star, that okay, anything that contributes to building leadership. I grew up without getting any pocket money. Once a year, my family, like my parents, would give me and my two siblings a little bit of money to go to the book fair and buy some books. So when I was very young, I picked up this book called Over 300 Great Lives and read about these 300 different people. And that gave me this, like inculcated this habit literally, that whatever you want to do, read about 100 or 30 or 50 or 20 examples from that particular field. And that's basically what I did when I was starting out. Looked at all these organizations and I was very, very surprised and shocked at that point in time that Google or Facebook or TED, they didn't start out saying, oh, we are a green battery company that is going to bring down your electricity by 15%, like electricity cost by 15%. TED said, ideas worth spreading. Google said, making knowledge more accessible, whatever it was. Like, I'm not going word by word there. So our thing was, okay, how do we operate in a space where the larger universe is powering next generation leaders? If at all there is any further clarity, it is on to educational opportunities and training. And that left a lot of room for us to build future organizational systems. What all has changed? I was a lot more intense, a lot more ambitious, almost aggressive when I was starting out. When I was in my undergrad, I used to operate on like 3 to 4 hours of sleep, 2 cans of Red Bull, quit Red Bull completely end of my senior year. We also had this frustration many times that other people are not able to see what we are trying to show. We wanted to show the problem to a lot of people, not realizing that maybe sometimes people learn better when they begin to see either the solution or the symbolic indicators of the solution. So those things have changed with time. A lot more patience has come in, and we have begun to master kind of the duality that when you have to do something for the rest of your life, go fast or go slow. It's fine. Know that you're changing the world and know that you're not changing the world. In all the futility of the world, know your significance, and in all the significance of the world, know your futility. So I think those things have definitely come with time. So if at all my immature self can make a remark today, a little more maturity and wisdom has come. But the larger system has kind of remained, an umbrella for the rest of the organization. So iPhone is a product, it's not the company. Likewise, within the Dexterity system, Dex School is a part of the Dexterity system. Dexterity College is a part of the Dexterity system. They're all platforms. They're not the organization itself. That really helped to keep room for continuing to build on and grow forward. Next. Whoever goes.
I can help you.
It's International Women's Day.
Go ahead.
Also happy International Women's Day. Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Okay, sure. I'm Ananya. I'm from Chandigarh and Patiala, and I grew up there. But I was just wondering, I'm sure we can all agree that dexterity is this incredible thing of, compassion, kindness, and belief in the potential of the community. And you yourself are a service leader aiming to create service leaders, but in the process of doing this daily for so many years, what motivates you when you dig down deep? What do you find, and how do you create that attitude and that motivation for the people you're trying to, inspire? How do you approach that?
That's a wonderful question. I think I'll take the second part first. How do you inspire the people who come into the system? I also add people who run the system. So I'll talk about the people who run the system, one sentence answer. Nobody at Dexterity except for me is a non-Dexter. So everybody who runs the Dexterity system, they've all gone through the system, gone to some of the best universities in the world, graduated, returned to India, and chose to become full-timers in the organization. So that really drives the organizational ethics, ethos, vision, values in a very major way. Because the organization changed their life in many ways, and they see what it can do to our country and the world, and that's the reason why they come in to become full-timers. Second is about young people who come into the system. When you do the same thing, but it's tied to a larger vision, a larger story, and that's the kind of conversation you are having around yourself at all times, and also you begin to see, these small blips and many times major ones around you, where young people are doing things that is phenomenal and inspirational. Those who you share a room with at your leadership development program, or those who you graduated next school with, and all these things. So that has a huge impact, but it is tying your own journey with something that is bigger than you, that's larger than you. Having that larger goal, I think at Dexterity, all of us take it as a unique and a rare privilege that we are born at this point in the history of our country, and we have the privilege of going to school and having all these opportunities, that we must commit to that larger call of nation building. And that's the reason why it's like reporting to duty sort of a thing. At Dexterity, we call our trainers. How do we do it? Connecting with opportunities. Dex Connect. Institutions or families can sign up. You go to dexconnect.org, you find out from a neighbor, friend, sometimes newspapers, and on the first Sunday of every month to your phone and to your email, these opportunity updates start getting delivered. They reach close to 7 million kids in the country. They reach over 1,000 institutions. And within these opportunity updates, you also find out about Dexterity opportunities. So, a NASA Space Settlement Contest is mentioned in the opportunity update. At the same time, Dexterity to College as an opportunity is mentioned. Or, Dexterity School of Leadership and Entrepreneurship is mentioned. So same supply chain of information that we've built also takes our opportunities to those places. That is one. How do we select them? Did you also mention that, or did I pick that up as a question on that one? Okay, so forget that part. The second part is about me being patriotic, and how do we, like the conversation about them returning back. The orientation we give at Dexterity is not about returning back to India. The orientation we give them is, please, if needed, stay there for a couple years, make a little bit of money, then come back. The orientation we give them is, some projects are global collective projects. So if you're working on cancer research in Massachusetts, and the best cancer research is happening there, it's a global project, India must play its role. All bright minds in the world must play their role, so please commit to that project there. If the Large Hadron Collider experiment, which some of you might have heard of, the LHC, is happening at CERN in Switzerland, then you should be committing to that there. Don't be like, oh, I'm going to come back to Mumbai and do this. No, some are global collective projects. The thing is, example plays a very important role. And for kids within the Dexterity system, they've seen people like me. I was a graduation speaker for my class here when I was an undergrad. That night, when everybody was doing the graduation party, I was on my way back to India. I was at the airport. I was not at the party. I graduated Harvard. I was the president of the student body. The night of my graduation, everybody was at the party. I was at JFK Airport, flying back to Delhi, and flying back to my hometown of Patna. So all of our Dexterity full-timers have technically done that. The night of their graduation, they flew back to the country. And for that reason, we tell our kids, because they are hell-bent on graduating and taking the first flight back home. Now, many of these kids are going to be amazing founders and leaders. Teammates, a full-timer at Dexterity, a proud graduate of a top American undergraduate institution, was walking down the street, went to the kid, started talking to him, and saw that the kid could speak in English. So he didn't tell him that he was from Dexterity. He talked to him for a little bit, and he asked him, how do you speak English? And he said, oh, I listen to cricket commentary, and I watch English movies. So my teammate thought that here's a smart kid. So he told him that, there are these Dexterity guys, and they identify kids, and they begin to groom them and train them. What do you want to do? So he said, remotely I'm doing school, but I do want to go to college and everything. So he said, all right, you go ahead and apply. Trying to see whether or not the kid would do it on his own. The kid applied. He came into the Dexterity system, went through Dexterity School of Leadership and Entrepreneurship, went through Dexterity to College, which is the career development program. 2 weeks back, he received a full scholarship to go to college. That small change can happen today because there's a system in place. There's a training process in place. There are modules in place. But today, I can go from one part of our country to another, go 200 miles, and there's so many houses and schools and community centers that are barren and libraries that are broken that I cannot fix today. But hundreds and thousands of dexterity kids, or maybe one dexterity kid who goes on to do something phenomenal in terms of holding an important leadership position, can do it. So what is in your locus of control right now? If you focus on that, and as students, it is how well you study and how well you build yourself out for the future, ranging from your skills and expertise to the kind of networks that you build and the kind of people you choose to surround yourself with, including your mentors and peers. So that is what I would say on that. Anything else? Or do I get out of the room?
I one
One more.
more. I've been so inspired by listening what Dexterity does, but I want to also ask you, you in your 20s as a student in Tufts or maybe later on at Harvard, sure being a very active student, also being in student government, also running Dexterity Global, maybe also doing 50 other things. How did you survive as a student, and is Red Bull the answer?
I'm not advertising Red Bull. I think, and you have to forgive me for this. So I was surrounded by student athletes quite a bit. I was the team manager of Tufts hockey when I was there. I was the team manager of Harvard hockey when I was there. We were the proud Ivy League champions and the Eastern Conference champions at Lake Placid in New York, which is the Olympic arena, which introduced me to hockey in the movie Miracle. Coach Kurt Brooks. It's part of the Dexterity curriculum at Dexterity. When kids come in, they watch the movie Miracle. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend. When the this is the 1980 US Olympic team. A bunch of college kids go on to beat the Russians and win the Olympic gold eventually. And when Mike Rusioni, so those of you who are American citizens here, Mike Rusioni, the captain of the US 1980 Olympic team, when he found out that at Dexterity Miracle is a part of the training program, he sent me his signed captain's jersey and a picture of his game-winning goal-scoring moment. But did hockey as well. Majority student athletes who I saw, they would wake up at 4, they would go do their practice, do everything else, still do well academically, and many of these institutions, majority of alumni who give back actually happen to be student athletes. Part of the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying is, what I've seen outside of college and in college, people who are busier continue to be more productive and continue to do better many times. It is just that, yeah, you can come if you know. So, it's just that you have to, the busier you are, I guess you're more organized, more punctual, you value your minutes and your seconds and your hours very much, and you're able to really commit to things when you are doing it. Also, it is easier getting tired doing one thing for a long time, but when you have a bunch of exciting things that you're kind of juggling between, and you're somebody who's fairly intelligent or decently intelligent, and when you begin to see the replication of one field into the other, it is exciting. And so overall, it wasn't all that bad. Student government can be a little bit of a headache sometimes, but then you deserve a short, long drive after that in order to overcome how stressful some student government meetings can get. I hope you have a good student government here. But in general, we had a great student government meeting too, but there are disagreements many times. But the fascinating part was that I think which wasn't accounted for, maybe in your question, every Friday and Saturday, every alternate Friday and Saturday, I would be on the team bus in the team hotel. We would travel for our games. And you are like a full-time athlete despite being a team manager. Like you're with the team throughout. So it's fascinating, it's exciting, but this is the time in your life when you can be up that long and do all that work. Freshman year, I almost experimented staying up 52 hours at a stretch. So all of those things happen, but this is the time when you do it. Now, in all of my travels, I still have a very rigorous travel schedule especially, but sometimes I tell my team that I need 5 hours of sleep, or I need, 4 hours of sleep, or I need a place to sleep after this, something like that. So it happens. I think when you're more passionate than tired, you get the job done. Do we let it be at that? Thank you very much for having me.
Brilliant questions, and thank you, Sharad, for the really insightful answers. And I would like to thank you all for coming out to the event. And thank you, Sharad, as well, for sparing your precious time for the event. I hope you guys enjoyed being here and had a lot to learn from the event. And that's all we have for today. If you want to come to more events like this, follow the speaker series on social media. And yeah, that's all we have for today. Thank you very much.